So let's go. One of the biggest pieces of recent news for indies is the union between the distributor Draft2Digital and ebook pioneer Smashwords. This brings together two of the industry's most innovative and author-friendly publishing platforms. So what does this mean for self-publishers? My name is Roz Morris. I'm a long-time indie author. I put my first ebook out in 2009, and Smashwords was already an established fixture in the indie world. Draft2Digital came along a few years later in 2012 as the industry matured, and that's now a good 10 years ago. For many indie authors, both platforms have been indispensable to their publishing lives. And the big question is, what changes are we likely to see with this merger? So here today, I have the two guys at the helm of this new indie super being, Draft2Digital CEO Kris Austin. Hello, Kris.
Hi, Roz. Thanks for having me.
And Smashwords founder Mark Coker. Hello, Mark.
Hi, Roz.
So before we talk about what lies ahead, let's wind back to the early days. I'll start with you, Mark. You formed Smashwords in 2008. How did it come about? What made you do it?
Well, my wife and I wrote a novel about the daytime television soap opera industry. So my wife is a former reporter for Soap Opera Weekly magazine. She used to work out of Hollywood. Her job was to go to the sets of the daytime television soap operas and interview the actors. When I first met her and I heard her stories about how wild and wacky that world was, I suggested she write a book about it. She said, well, why don't we write that book together? And I'd always dreamed of writing a book, but not about soap operas. But I took a sabbatical from my job. I was running a PR agency at the time. And we moved to Burbank, California, and interviewed about 50 soap opera industry insiders and wrote a satire on the soap opera industry. So, I followed the journey that many first-time authors follow. You don't know anything about the industry. You write your book. You think it deserves to be read by millions of people. You work with book doctors and editors and do a million revisions, get it ready, shop it to agents. We were lucky enough to have two agents offer us representation. We got to interview them and decide which one we wanted to work with. And even though we were repped by one of the top agencies in New York, they were unable to sell the book after 2 years. The traditional publishers were unwilling to take a chance on a novel that targeted soap opera fans because previous books that targeted soap opera fans had not performed well. And so, as you might imagine, it was a really disappointing experience, soul crushing. We wanted to get our book out there. And so as I thought about this experience, I realized that we weren't alone. There were hundreds of thousands of other writers who had written books, had manuscripts that were just going to never be published, that were going to disappear, in their attic, be trashed, never published, never exposed to readers. And I thought, this is just wrong. You can't judge books based on their commercial merit alone, or even perceived commercial merit. Publishers don't know what books are going to sell. Often the biggest books are the books that come out of left field. They're the black swans. You don't anticipate them. And so, I thought about this problem, and I just thought about the enormous cultural waste and loss of thousands, millions of books that would never be published, that would go to the grave with the author, unknown to humanity. And so I thought, well, at the time, YouTube was coming on big, and people were basically self-publishing on YouTube, and blogging was coming on big, and people were finding enormous audiences. And I thought, well, every writer in the world should have a right to publish a book. And so I thought about that problem and how to solve that problem. And, my background is here in tech in Silicon Valley. And I thought, well, there could be a tech solution to this. And so I started investigating ebooks. And I thought, wouldn't it be cool if someone somewhere could create a free publishing platform that could say yes to every writer in the world and give every writer a chance to publish what they want and let readers choose what they want to read, rather than having publishers and the traditional industry gatekeepers decide what readers could read. And I had faith that if ordinary writers around the world could have the chance to publish, that huge the future classics of tomorrow would be published by indie authors. And we weren't calling them indie authors at the time. So that was the general idea, and so that's what we launched with in 2008, a free ebook publishing platform and we would only make money if the authors made money. That was the basic model. We weren't going to charge for services. We weren't going to charge setup fees. We were going to give writers total control over their books, total control over pricing, total control over distribution, and let writers be their own publishers. And so that's what we did. And so we launched in 2008, 2009. I got the idea, the crazy idea, I realized readers didn't know anything about Smashwords. They didn't know to come to Smashwords to buy our books. We weren't selling hardly anything at the Smashword store then. On a good day, we were selling $10 worth of books and only taking 10% of that as our commission.
I was going to ask about this because it is such a huge gamble to set up the tech that you had. I mean, those of us who've been with Smashwords a long time know about the meat grinder. And yes. I mean, it's a thing you had to build. So yes. There's a lot of faith you had to put into the idea that this would work.
Well, it's because I believed in the extraordinary talents locked between the brains and the fingertips of ordinary writers around the world. I just had faith that some small percentage of self-published authors would achieve enormous commercial success, and we wanted to enable that. But I also wanted to enable, it's not just about commercial success. That's not the only thing that matters. If your potential audience is just your grandchildren, and you want to pass on your memories or your favorite recipes or whatever, that book is just as important to book culture as a New York Times bestseller. That's the way I've always looked at it. So yeah, we did take enormous risks because at the time in 2008, ebooks accounted for about 0.5% of the overall book market. And we were going to provide a free service to writers that no publisher wanted to publish, selling books in a format that readers weren't reading. And, I ran the numbers on my business plan and the numbers didn't make any sense, but I just thought, the world needs this.
Oh, it absolutely did, yes. And one thing I wanted to ask you about was those other publishing channels, because you had to convince retailers to take a chance on products that weren't coming through the usual publishing channels, that were new because ebooks were pretty new. You also had to decide on royalty rates to authors and discounts to retailers, and you actually even let the authors decide what the retail prices should be. This must have required you to do a lot of persuading.
Yes. Yeah, so very early on there in 2009, the first two retailers that we managed to open up to self-published books were Barnes & Noble and Sony. And to my surprise, they wanted all of our books. And I had to push back on them a little bit and say, no, you don't want all of our books. Let's establish some minimum standards, at least for readability and formatting quality. And so that's what we did. We created this concept of the premium catalog. So we're not making any editorial judgments, but we at least want the book to look attractive, acceptably attractive. But so the retailers, they wanted to carry these books. Traditional, the brick and mortar retailers always wanted to carry more books, but they were limited by the physical limitations of brick and mortar. You can only stock, 50,000 books in a store or 80,000 books. And they didn't have a way to effectively onboard self-published authors. They couldn't work individually with each self-published author. They didn't have their own publishing platforms. That wasn't really a concept yet, other than at Amazon. So they realized that we could help make these books available in their store in a way that was economically feasible for them. And so we opened up Sony and Barnes & Noble, and then we struck deals with Amazon and Kobo and then Apple in 2010. Once our books made it into distribution, they started selling and our business took off. And those were in those very early years. I mentioned how when we launched Smashwords, ebooks accounted for about 0.5%, but things went exponential after that. And not because of Smashwords. I mean, we were a small contributor to that, but much thanks to Amazon and Barnes and Noble, and then Apple and all the major book retailers embracing ebooks. So
Right.
that was the start.
Yeah,
And then we opened up libraries.
Hell of it. I want to ask you about libraries and subscriptions a bit later, actually. Yes, I mean, that's a hell of a hero's journey, actually, because you had to invent such a lot. And I really want people to appreciate.
And we did it without venture capital as well.
Right, yes.
And that was an important enabler of our success. Because a VC, if we had VC funding, in our first year of operation, when they saw that we were bringing in $10 in revenue a day, they would have forced us to change the business model and start exploiting authors. And I never wanted to do that. I wanted to do what was right for authors from the very beginning. And it gave us the freedom to do what was right. It gave me the freedom to, pursue this crazy business, to my own vision.
It certainly has given so many writers a risk-free way to self-publish. I mean, our appreciation for what you've done here is enormous. Kris, let me move on to you. A few years later, Draft2Digital was founded. How did that come into being, and why was it worth doing, especially when there was already Smashwords?
Yeah, ultimately, it was, I guess it was 2011, 2010, maybe a little bit earlier. A really good friend of mine that I went to college with, he's a writer, and he wanted to publish his book like most writers want to do, and they dream of being published. And he tried the traditional routes. They weren't really doing much, and he learned about Smashwords and started using Smashwords platform. And ultimately saw that he started getting success with that. The issues that he was running into is he felt like the whole process, not only because of Smashwords, just the whole industry was just making it too complicated from a technical perspective to really get the books into a good format so that they look nice and they get distributed and sell well. The meat grinder was definitely very impressive at the time for what it was doing, so a third party of this startup is another really good friend of ours who I also went to school with, and he's a developer. And so my background's computer science as well, and I've been in IT related roles my whole life until this company. And the software that was created was really a one-click solution that could convert Word documents to EPUBs just really, really easily, like without having to do a whole lot of stuff. And ultimately, I guess it was realized that this could be given out to more authors. More authors need access to this simple technology and this easy to do thing. And Mark had already proven a business model with Smashwords that seemed very effective and you could actually make a business out of. And so I was asked by my two friends, hey, do you want to try to run a business around this sort of product? And I was just like, sure. I mean, I can learn how. I mean, I like to learn new things. I've always wanted to learn new things. And when I really got into the publishing industry and the goals and what Smashwords was clearly making possible for authors, it became clear to me that this is a whole group of people that need good tools. They need help to be able to realize their dreams. And I felt that we could build something that could make this possible for them to reach their goals. And I just started really feeling for the author community quite deeply as they were having to go through the challenging parts of a traditional world that wasn't really interested in helping them. And Mark showed how it could be done. And we felt that we could help expand on that tradition that he started, and we ultimately copied Smashwords' business model, and so that we could we wanted to be aligned with authors, just like Smashwords. We wouldn't make any money unless the authors made money. And so yeah, and that's basically what we did. We started in 2012. At the very last week of 2012, we released our beta product, and we had actually asked authors to try it out. We needed lots of Word documents that we could test with, and they sent them to us. And I can remember being there my first day. I was running everything, customer support and development, and I was distributing to retailers manually. I mean, these were the early days. It was just wild. And but it was a lot of fun. And yeah, so ultimately it was to help out one author, and we were able to build something that could help out, hundreds of thousands of authors. So, yeah.
So are you saying that the Draft2Digital tool was a little bit easier for authors to use?
Yes, I mean, that was our intention. I mean, I don't want to make Mark feel bad, but our actual goal was, my mandate was build a better Smashwords. That's what our goal was, because we felt what Smashwords was doing was exactly what authors needed, but we felt it needed to be a whole lot easier. And so that's what we did. We went and made a better Smashwords. That was our goal. Yeah. So.
But in the true spirit of indie land, there is a place for both. And there are people thousands of people use Smashwords, thousands use Draft2Digital. So there was room for both approaches. So you guys have both seen a lot of change. I want to ask you what you've learned about the book industry and helping indie authors to thrive in this time, and also how the indie author world is different now compared with those early days. Mark, I'll start with you.
Well, in the early days, the big challenge was access. Ordinary writers didn't have access to publishing. Only a very small percentage of authors could get their books into bookstores, and the only way to do that was to get to, be blessed by a traditional publisher. So, that's a big challenge that we tackled at the very beginning, was to just open up access. By opening up access, and there are multiple components to that. We talked about opening up the distribution, but also by making the service free, made the service accessible to every writer in the world. So that access challenge was solved over the first maybe 4 years. But by the time Draft2Digital came along, retailers were, finally strongly embracing indie authors. They were still learning how ebooks worked. I mean, everybody was, and how to ingest thousands of books. And then shortly after that, I think what we saw is that the indie author community really pioneered the best practices in ebook marketing, because ebooks were so new, and a lot of those best practices are now being adopted by traditional publishers. And,
yes, so
what we've seen since, I've got to say that for the average indie author, the world has become more complex for them than it was 14 years ago. And the industry has gotten so large. There are so many different players in this business. It's confusing for a new author who's just starting out. Like, it was confusing. It's been confusing for the last decade. You had these two great services to choose from, Draft2Digital and Smashwords, and then dozens of other services doing the same thing. And how does an author decide what to do? And for many authors, the decision was just paralyzing, and it made it easy to just go with whoever the biggest player was. And that's not necessarily in the best long-term interests of an author, to make their book exclusive to a single retailer.
Yes. Kris, have you got anything to add to that?
Oh, I definitely, I think the biggest challenge for authors over the 10 years has been how quickly the marketing side of things changes, and the tools available to authors. Just navigating that is just kind of ongoing. And as Mark just alluded to, but Amazon and what they do and their choices have make big impacts. And in that time period, you've seen Kindle Unlimited get created. subscription services really started to take off. You had Oyster at one point, and then you have Scribd now and Kobo Plus, and subscriptions. I think they're still trying to find their true footing, but that didn't exist 10 years ago. That wasn't even a thing. And then KU itself, Kindle Unlimited, went through 3 different iterations of how they pay out authors. And this stuff does get complicated and confusing. You get new retailers showing up, you get other retailers disappearing, and navigating all that can be quite daunting. And then what worked last year for your marketing doesn't work this year, right? And so it's a lot for people to keep up with. So.
It certainly is.
Yeah,
Yes.
and then,
Sorry, Mark, I was just going to
Oh.
say, in the early days, I do remember it just seemed easy to market. We were novelties even.
yeah, in those early days, readers had never seen a 99-cent book before, or a $2.99 book. And so the early indie authors that were pricing at those low price points were reaching massive audiences just for the price point alone. But the introduction of ebooks also changed the dynamics of publishing, because in the old world of publishing, when it was a print-centric world, the traditional publishers might publish 300,000 books a year, and those books were flushed out of the system very quickly and pushed out of print to make room for the next books, because there was only so much shelf space in the physical brick and mortar stores. What we see with ebooks is that ebooks are immortal. Ebooks can occupy that virtual shelf forever, even if your book doesn't sell a single copy at a retailer in a year, or even if your book is priced at free, the retailer still wants to stock that book forever. So what this means is that we have now seen every single year there's a growing glut of high quality, low cost books out there. So the selection of books, the competition of books, the challenges of discoverability become more and more pronounced every year. And that creates additional challenges for authors, because when you've got a marketplace that has a glut of high quality, low cost products, and it starts to become difficult to differentiate one product from another, often the way the product producers differentiate is to lower their prices. And that leads to devaluation. So that's a really big challenge that authors are facing now. There's not just the devaluation of royalty rates, but there's hidden devaluations too, like hidden tolls and taxes. Like if you have to advertise your book just to get visibility within a store, if you have to pay money, you're actually forcing your own royalty rate lower. And so these are new challenges that authors are still coming to terms with, and many authors still don't quite understand. That we're approaching the point where the 70% royalty rate is, for all intents and purposes, is becoming a myth for a lot of authors.
Yes, it is. And I'm increasingly seeing authors, before they publish, they're saying, I'll go and do some marketing and I'll get some readers. And I'm thinking it's not going to be as easy as you think. And then afterwards, as they start to realize I'm I'm like a speck of plankton in the ocean.
Yes.
Though it is really hard. I think it has become a lot harder in the last few years. I wonder what it's like for retailers. Are you getting any feedback, Kris? Are you getting any feedback on how the needs of retailers are changing?
Yeah, so retailers generally on the ebook side are happy to get all the content that they can. And the early challenges with some retailers was allowing books to be priced at free. That was just a thing that didn't make any sense to them. But I would say the challenges for a lot of retailers now is figuring out how to choose books to spotlight on their stores. I mean, how do you do promos and promotions, and how do you make sure their readers find the books that they want to find? And this is because there are so many books to choose from. This has been, I think, a challenge for all the retailers. But what is also good there, though, is that the retailers are starting to learn that they can target more niche categories. You can, because there's so much content out there, they get into these really tiny, finely targeted audience categories, which is something that just couldn't happen before. Before, when you only had a few thousand new books a year, it's just not going to be that targeted. But now indie authors will write in any niche you can imagine. If you can think of it, there's books out there for it. And some of these authors can survive with can make a living, a great living, with having only a couple thousand readers interested in their topic. And it's just been unheard of. You couldn't do that before. And I think that's great. And I think that retailers are just trying to figure out how to make sure these readers who are looking for very specific content can actually find that content. So.
I believe I saw in an interview with Joanna Penn that Mark, you were talking about how you have a lot of data between you now at Draft2Digital and Smashwords, and that you can use this to help retailers target readers. Can you talk a bit about that?
Sure. Well, yeah, Kris made a really good point there about the ability of online retailers to improve discoverability and categorization. So if you think about a traditional brick and mortar store, or they're in the UK, you call them, I guess, high street stores. I'm getting that right?
We use the term bricks and mortar. We learn from you.
Okay. Well, if you think about it, so you go into your traditional brick and mortar store, there might be just 20 or 30 different shelves organized by category, but there are actually hundreds, if not thousands, of different categories, subcategories underneath there. And so when you move, thanks to digital books, when you move the books online onto a virtual shelf, you can move from 30 shelves to 3,000 shelves, or an unlimited number of shelves. And so a reader can drill down to the finest, tiniest, most specified niche to find the book that is going to satisfy them the most. And what Kris said there about authors finding audiences for these niches. When you move book selling online, you can aggregate the total worldwide audience to make that small niche that wasn't previously economical to go after. It then becomes possible for every author to reach it. So by our two companies joining together, I don't think anybody in the industry has access to the data that we have. We can see what's selling at every retailer, what's selling to libraries. We can aggregate our knowledge together. We can use this knowledge to help inform retailers about what books are most highly anticipated by readers, down to these very specific niches. So we've got really great data on which books are the reader pleasers. And we want to share that data because we want our retailers to be as successful as possible, because when our retailers are successful, our authors are successful. Everything that we do is about the author.
Yes, that's great. That's a great way of using this information to prime retailers to say, this will probably do well for you. So we're giving you advance warning. Is that the kind of thing you're thinking of doing?
Oh, well, both of our companies have already been doing that.
Oh, right.
So, we know which are the most highly anticipated pre-orders, by category. And retailers are very future focused. They're very focused on what's new. Retailers want to serve their customers with books that will please their customers. So we can share this data. We do share this data. We've been sharing this data for years with the retailers to help them identify the books that are going to please their customers the most.
Right. Well, let's not forget subscription services, which you did mention earlier, and libraries as well. And these are they seem to be increasingly significant markets for indies. Are their needs changing too? And how can indie authors make the best of the opportunities that these markets are going to present?
Well, we've been excited about the library market for a long time. We opened up Overdrive and others for the first time. But the library market is not yet as evolved and sophisticated with indie authors as retailers are. Libraries are all about curation. I mean, librarians are trained to be curators and to only acquire, certain types of titles, and librarians look to book reviews and things like that to help identify which books are worthy of purchasing. They look to the traditional publishers, which they trust, to identify books that are worthy of publishing. So this is a really difficult challenge. It's not, well, it's difficult for libraries to get up to speed with indie ebooks, because most of these books are not going to be reviewed by the New York Times. They're not going to be reviewed by Library Journal. They're not published by a traditional publisher. And so it creates new curation challenges for libraries. And so, I think most librarians do want to welcome more indie content into their libraries, but they're still not sure how to do it in a way that matches with their prior conceptions of what their job was.
I do think libraries, though, had library providers like Overdrive, Hoopla, and there are others. The biggest innovation I think they made to help with this particular problem is the cost per checkout model, which is a way for libraries to have books available for patrons to browse that the library doesn't currently own. And then the library only has to pay when that book is checked out by their patron. And this has been really great for indie authors, because the libraries don't have to take a chance on an author. They can just choose huge swaths of categories of books to make available for their patrons. And they only have to pay for it if their patrons actually read them. And I think it's a fantastic deal for discoverability for authors, for indie authors specifically, because there is that issue, what Mark was just describing. It's just fantastic. And then you have Overdrive, who's really good at aggregating data across all their libraries, and they can help bring these categories and groups together so that entire library systems can just grab 10,000 indie titles to make available without buying them all, which they wouldn't be able to afford. But now they can just put them all available, and they only got to pay as they go. I think that model is fantastic for indie authors. Indie authors should have their books in libraries everywhere that allows that model. And then if you happen to be a really popular book in the cost per checkout model, the libraries can still purchase your book at your normal library price. So that's the biggest innovation I've seen in libraries since we've been doing this, and I think it's been a huge boon.
And to ask a technical question.
I'd agree.
Sorry, yeah. I was just going to ask a technical question. Do authors get to choose on their dashboards whether they want this cost per checkout model, or how does that work?
Yeah, so through the Draft2Digital interface, you can definitely opt out of the cost per checkout model. So we let you choose if you want to be in it. By default, you're in the cost per checkout model if you're going to libraries through our system. But some authors are uncomfortable with it. So as always, author choice is like paramount for us. We allow authors to choose what they want to have happen with their content. And so we made sure that there was ability for authors that didn't feel comfortable with that. Because one disadvantage of the cost per checkout model that some authors might see is they're going to get paid 1/10 of a full purchase of the book. So if you might be selling your title to the library for $5, but if it's available for cost per checkout, you're going to get paid 50 cents every time someone checks out that book. So you would need 10 people to check it out.
On the other hand, the library might not buy it at all because they've only got a certain budget.
Precisely, and that's why we think it works so well. Yeah,
yes.
But some authors just didn't feel comfortable with the 50 cents, or sometimes it could be 10 cents, right? Maybe you're priced your book at $1, and so yeah, that's. But yeah, you can definitely choose. You can choose. We strongly encourage people to keep their books in there, but we always allow authors to keep complete control over their work. So if they don't want to do it, they don't have to. So, yeah.
And what about subscription services? Can you see from the back end whether they are doing better for authors now? Because readers and Netflix watchers are all getting used to getting everything by subscription. rather than buying outright. Can you see if there's more of a trend towards subscription services, if more authors are doing better by that now?
Yeah, so as with everything, every model, every retailer brings different readers. So you're going to have some readers who prefer an a la carte purchase process because they don't read, maybe they read 2 or 3 novels a year, maybe 1 novel a year, right? I mean, some of these sci-fi or fantasy novels are just really long, and that's just what they're going to do. But other readers, I mean, there are some genres like romance genre where your typical reader might go through 100 books in a year. And so I think you can see why some might choose different ways of doing things. And then different retailers have different targeted audiences. But specific to subscription question, what I would say is that it's growing fast. Readers are getting used to this model, as you just described. They do it with music, they do it with movies. Books is inevitable. I see that I don't see why consumers would treat books differently than TVs, movies, and music. It's all media consumption. And so it's going to continue to grow, and it might even end up being a major part of the digital book business. Yeah.
I was going to say, are you seeing a corresponding drop in outright sales?
So actually, no. So there is a slight decline in what you might call, in the outright sales. But the subscription more than makes up for it. It's always an increase of total sales, always. It's not, I haven't seen any examples of an author making less money by their books being in subscription. You put your book in subscription, you've basically just widened your net of available readers. And so you've given them more choice. When you give readers more choice, you reach more readers. And so, yes, you will see probably a small decline, or some people might call it a big decline in their direct sales, but I've never seen a case yet that it wasn't made up for with the actual subscription sales. So.
Okay, so give us a glimpse of the future. What are you looking forward to developing together? Mark, start with you.
Well, we are an author-first company. So when I look to the future, I think, how can we do more for authors? And that was the primary motivation for our 2 companies joining together. We realized that by joining together, we can do more for authors. So I'm really excited about the possibilities with print on demand, and especially what Draft2Digital is doing with D2D Print. I think it's going to be just as disruptive to print on demand as Smashwords was to ebook publishing 14 years ago.
Wow,
It's
tell me
going
more
to
about
be,
that.
well, it's going to be huge, I think. Well, we talked about access. We talked about, when you make something accessible, whether it's to writers in self-publishing, if you make publishing accessible to them, when you make ebooks accessible to readers, low-cost ebooks accessible to readers, when you make ebooks accessible to readers in different methods and formats, magic happens. So when you look at print on demand, the current state of the art in print on demand technology is really still first generation. Kind of in the way Smashwords was first generation, and D2D came along and really represented almost a second generation of ebook publishing. What D2D is doing now in print represents the second generation of print on demand.
Tell me how that works. What is second generation print on demand?
So print on demand is too complicated now for the average indie author. The average indie author just can't do print. It's too expensive, too complicated. You've got to hire professional print designers to design the layout. You've got to hire cover designers to do the front cover, the back cover, and the spine image. It's just a lot more technically difficult and cost prohibitive for the average indie author to really make full advantage of print. And so along comes Kris with the idea that this should be just as simple as clicking a button.
This sounds great.
And so
Tell me how.
I should let Kris talk about it.
Yeah. So exactly what Mark was describing, what we realized was indie authors were not getting their books into print. And we felt that print on demand should be as simple as an ebook. It's digital. In essence, all you're doing is providing digital files to a printer that will print them when a copy is ordered. So conceptually, it's extremely straightforward. It should just be the same thing. Of course, you're dealing with the print industry, which has its own history of 100, 200 years of history in print that we had to deal with. But print on demand is huge. You're going to see, I fully expect all print books, nearly all print books within a decade to be print on demand print books. It's just a way of the future. The technology is going to be this way. You're not going to need to stock books anymore in warehouses and ship them as ordered. It's just, I think it's the way it's going to be. And I think indie authors, they made a huge inroads into ebooks very, very quickly because of their innovation and their marketing and their ability to target niche markets. Those, I see those as the two big reasons. They could respond very quickly to reader needs. And I think we should make that happen on the print side.
What about the complication that Mark mentioned of how difficult
to expand on that? Yes, and that's where I was moving. So the complication, what we did was design a system that can convert an ebook into a print-ready book.
Wow.
On demand. You click and you tell us to do it, and we will convert it into a print-ready PDF. So your interior will be completely laid out automatically. And then we can convert your ebook cover into a full wraparound cover for your print book. So you'll have your ebook cover plus the spine with the title and author on it. And the back will have a description. It could have an author bio or author picture. All this is automatically laid out. And then you can customize things if you feel like it, but the default is all automatic. The point is that it shouldn't take you any extra time. And you get to see a full preview of it on our website as you do this, and you hit submit, and we send your book into distribution, and it'll be for sale anywhere that will sell print books.
This is so exciting.
And
really?
automatically beautiful.
Yeah.
So again,
it always looks good. Always looks great. Yeah.
So again, look back at the history of our two companies, and Smashwords took the meat grinder approach to creating ebooks, and that approach put the responsibility upon the author to learn how to format their book within Microsoft Word and to learn Microsoft styling so that they could do line by line styling and design in their ebook. As a result of that approach, some of our books are absolutely beautiful if the author is sophisticated, but the average author isn't that sophisticated. D2D came along with a template-based approach to designing books. So they didn't need a style guide like Smashwords authors did. And D2D reliably produces absolutely beautiful books. All right, and it's much easier for the author, much easier for the average author to do that. So this is part of the magic of D2D's approach. They see a problem and they say, well, how can I turn that into a button? How can I buttonize it? And how can I make it automatically beautiful and easy and just a no-brainer for any author to create a beautiful book that you can be proud of. So this is going to be a huge innovation on the print side.
Yes. Yeah.
And remember that still 75% of the market today is print. So by making print accessible to every indie author, magic is going to happen. We are going to see new authors come out of nowhere that are embraced by print readers, that go on to become New York Times bestsellers, that go on to get physical brick and mortar bookstore distribution because their book has become so popular in print. I predict that's going to happen.
Yeah, that's huge. It's huge to be able to do that, and a huge feat to have created a system that can do it.
It does not exist anywhere else in the industry. So D2D Print is the only one that can do this, and it looks great. Everybody should go try it out. So we have a wait list to get into the program, but because it's very popular, but we'll be getting out of that full beta phase hopefully by the end of the year. But until then,
I was going to
people
ask,
should-
when do you expect it to actually be available to everybody?
So once the wait list is emptied, then it is effectively available to everybody. And I think that'll happen in the next few months. So,
Next few months, right? Okay, so maybe by September.
yeah,
it'll be
hopefully way
available.
before that. Yeah, but of course
Okay.
we got a merger going on now too, right? So,
Yeah.
but it's fun. It's a great product, and if you're really interested in D2D print, you could just email our customer support team, and they'll probably just invite you in right away. So.
Yeah, and
Okay.
now another exciting thing about
Mm.
print is that print is going to help your ebook sales as well.
Mhm.
And your ebook sales are going to help your print sales. The
Yep.
two are symbiotic and help catalyze the other.
Yeah, I want to push authors over time more to consider simultaneous format release. The best time for you to sell your print book is when your ebook is popular and vice versa. So you're going to sell more of both versions whenever you're charting, right? So if you're hitting charts, so there's a reason for having multiple formats on release. If you can do audiobooks and afford to do audiobooks, I recommend doing your best to try to wait and release all three formats at the exact same time. You will see a benefit. Yeah.
I wanted to ask about audiobooks actually, because Smashwords has a partnership with Findaway Voices.
So do we.
Yep. Yeah. Okay. Right. So that's all going to continue. And okay. And something else I wanted to ask about D2D Print is the worldwide distribution. Will you go to all the places that Ingram and Amazon do?
Yes. Yeah. We definitely go all the places Ingram does. These books will enter the full wholesale distribution market. So anyone who purchases books through distribution, definitely if they have agreements with Ingram, they'll see these books and they can buy them. Yeah.
And what about a discount system? The retailers discount, the wholesale discount, is all that going to be as it is on Ingram?
Yeah, so at the moment, we don't have all the full features and abilities that you might see at Ingram Spark in regards to discounting. So at this time, authors give us a 55% discount, but they can choose the price, but they give us a 55% discount, and then we send it into distribution. So the authors will get paid 45%.
So are there any plans to vary the discount? Because on Ingram you can.
That's a hope, yes. Future versions. So we like to do things in a way that it's more of a software term, but we use the term minimal viable product. So we got to make a product that is useful and that people are going to use. And then after they start using it, then we'll start improving it. We'll find out what people want. If people want better discount choices, then we'll start working on that.
Okay.
If they want hardcovers, we'll start working on that. At the moment, this is just a paperback solution. So we'll get the feedback from authors as things grow. Because the problem with trying to release a product with all the features at the beginning is you never release that product. There's just too much you're trying to get done at once. So we do this in steps. And our first step is a phenomenal paperback process with a fixed discount. That's our step number one, really. But authors can order their own copies for themselves at the unit cost. So they don't have to, so they can want to have 100 books to take to a conference or whatever, they can do that at cost. And we have that all built. And we'll be adding support for that in Australia and the UK very, very soon. So you'll get that feature really soon there in the UK. And that's probably the biggest thing holding up the UK authors from using D2D Print. But once we have that out next month or two, then I think that it's going to get really big over in your neck of the woods. And yeah.
So does that mean you'll be printing locally in the sort of country? Say I want to order, it would be silly to print in the US and then ship them to me. So you'll print in the UK.
Yeah, it'll print in the UK and mail to you right now. We've actually already tested this on the back end, so we can kind of order it manually one off, and it goes and it works just fine. We're trying to make it so the authors can do it themselves on the website.
Because a big problem has always been shipping costs of copies.
Yeah, it'll be their local. Yeah. It'll be what you would expect, normal rates. Yeah.
Lovely. Well, I have some specific questions from Ali members. The Smashword Store. Kris, I understand that your authors have been asking for a storefront for quite some time, and Smashwords authors like having a storefront. What's the plan?
The plan is to make the Smashword Store bigger and better. You're right. Authors have been asking us about a Smashword Store since the day we started. They were like, "Hey, when's Draft2Digital going to open their store?" That was like one of the first things that people asked us, and I always said, never, because it's like a whole nother business model. I mean, you're making a whole separate business, and but we think that Smashword Store is very important. It's very author-friendly store, the most author-friendly store in the world, that authors will have a lot of control, and they do have a lot of control. And one of our major goals is to improve the feature set and the look of the store, and to help authors sell even more books at the Smashword Store. So.
And get D2D authors into the Smashword Store.
Yeah, that's like step one, actually. So it's like on our short list is get D2D books into the Smashword Store. So, yeah.
And that leads me to another question, which somebody asked me, which is, she says she's got all her books on Draft2Digital and has just started adding them to Smashwords. Is it worth continuing to do that, or will they automatically be ported across?
We'll automatically be moving things across. So we hope that won't take long, maybe a couple months. So if she's in a hurry, she can go and get it up now at the Smashword Store. We'll figure out a way to merge it all together. That's on us. There's obviously a lot of authors already using both systems.
Mm-hmm.
So we already have to build all the tools to merge accounts. So to that author, I would say, if you want to keep doing what you're doing, that's just fine. But for all the other Draft2Digital authors that aren't in the Smashword Store or on the Smashword side, we'll be doing that for you in the future.
Can you give a timescale for that? I'm
really hoping 2 months. That's probably aggressive, but in that time frame, so 2 to 3 months. Yeah.
So if she just waits, then they will automatically appear on Smashwords in a couple of months anyway.
Correct.
Doesn't have to.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. Authors of erotica have been a bit worried that they can publish on Smashwords but not on Draft2Digital. Will they still be able to keep the books on Smashwords and keep doing what they've been doing?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. The big expansion on that is our goal is to take the Smashwords erotica know-how. They know erotica better than Draft2Digital has historically. Our goal is always to get all the books retailers will take to the retailers. And the Smashword Store has the most broad group of books it will take. And there's no reason we would want to limit that. So.
Okay. Will the terms of service change in either platform?
That's not likely, not in any material way, I wouldn't expect. The Draft2Digital terms is what I would expect most authors to, it would probably be mostly that. We'll have to add some stuff related to the direct selling of the Smashword Store. So we'd probably take that from the terms of service from the Smashword side. But materially, you shouldn't expect anything to change. This would be mostly legal minutia. Yeah, you probably don't need to worry about. So.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and the erotica policies at Smashwords, which are unique to Smashwords,
right,
will be adopted by Draft2Digital.
Okay, right. What about promotional tools? Are the Smashwords promotional tools going to stay as they are? Are there going to be more added? Can you say?
They're going to get better. That's my expectation. So right now we have incredible tools. We've got Smashwords coupons and all the different types of Smashwords coupons, because we've continued to innovate on the coupon side over the last 14 years. We've got self-serve merchandising in the Smashword Store. So authors can put their books on sale on demand. On any typical day, we've got 4,000 or 5,000 books that are on sale, driven by the authors, controlled by the authors. Authors have access to our homepage features by taking advantage of these self-serve merchandising tools. I really look forward to Draft2Digital's expertise in user interfaces and user experience, because I think all of our tools can be made easier to use. And if you make anything easier to use, it becomes more accessible. And if it becomes more accessible, more people can take advantage of it.
And speaking of easy to use, and we've already talked a little bit about the Smashwords formatting guide. I would just like to say the Smashwords style guide is an absolute model of clarity. I used it when I formatted my very first ebook. I did not have a clue what to do. I didn't even own an e-reader, but I got through it because I just followed your instructions step by step. You deserve we have it in this country, a campaign for plain English, and they give awards. Well, the Smashword style guide absolutely deserves one because it took me through everything, and I still follow it today. But as you said, some people don't want to go to all that trouble. And someone has asked on the Alley forum, would we still have to use the Smashwords formatting guide?
No, the goal is, so the Draft2Digital system is very different. Our style guide is like 2 paragraphs. So and it's because our goal is our software detects your style. That's the way it's designed. It tries to detect your actual style, and then it converts it into the Draft2Digital templating system. Then you can use our templates to choose how you want your book to look. We do intend, because we know there's many authors who like the Smashwords style guide and that Smashwords meat grinder tool. We have an intention to make sure we can still support that for the authors that want that. We do think a lot of authors will probably be happy to be able to use the Draft2Digital templates and all that. We're hoping to support the meat grinder format straight into the template system. So you kind of get your favorite stuff, and you could go straight to templates if you want to. You'll be able to support both. The goal is supporting both. So
it's good that yeah, the choice, I was just about to say, Mark, the choice is important because I come from a very old school publishing background, and I know how to format print books, and I can do it with sort of InDesign and everything. And I have always enjoyed the control. So there will be people like me who won't want to leave the control to an algorithm, and there are people who think, gosh, I don't want to be bothered with that. That's a whole different thing. You know, I just want someone to make it easy for me. And it's great to have the choice of both. There will always be some people who prefer one and some people who prefer another.
Right. We have a philosophy at Draft2Digital, which is our tools should be like super easy for someone who has no idea how any of this stuff works. The whole interface is this way. We start asking about metadata, and we ask about layout and all of that. We do that all. That's our first rule set, is it should be easy for anybody, doesn't matter who. But then on top of that, we say we also want to support power users, the users who want the control. We want to also give them the tools, but the default mode is kind of like super easy. No matter what you do, you're going to get something that looks good at the end. But we've built lots of power user tools along the way, so the meat grinder, I call that a power user tool. So it's a tool we'll be very happy to add to the system, and that way people who want that really tight control will absolutely have that ability.
Why did you call it meat grinder, Mark?
I gotta say, that was my decision, and I regret that decision.
I don't know. I have an affection for it, I have to say.
It was tongue-in-cheek from the very beginning, and it kind of stuck, and it was fun. But I quickly learned that a lot of authors, when they first were presented with that name, it was startling. Some authors found it upsetting. The idea of my book being turned into hamburger. So, if anyone looks at my public communications and blogging over the last 5-10 years, I don't use the meat grinder term very often, but I know a lot of people are attached to it.
Here I am putting mustard on it.
Well, enjoy it.
Here's a sensible question. What payment system will be used for authors going forwards? Will it be whatever Draft2Digital has and whatever Smashwords has, according to where the sales are made? How's that going to work?
So
more options.
Yeah, in the near term, it's going to be exactly what you're used to. But once we get everything migrated over, it's going to be the Draft2Digital payment system, which is so at Smashwords you get mostly just PayPal and checks. At Draft2Digital, you're going to get PayPal. You're going to get direct deposit, and we support direct deposits in the UK via either wire transfers or EFTs, I think y'all call them.
Mhm.
Payoneer for authors who might have Payoneer. So you're going to have more options with Draft2Digital. Just basically, we pay in a lot of different ways. So.
Right. I've come across various platforms that require you to invent a new account on something you've never heard of.
Yeah,
it's a pain.
We are always like, authors, it's their money and they should be able to get it how they want it. That's always been our goal. So.
And we want to get it in your pocket as soon as possible.
As fast as possible. Yeah.
And what about the tax forms? Around the world, we all have different tax treaties, and are the tax forms going to be easy to access?
Yeah, we'll use the Draft2Digital interface. It's a third party we use to build most of that interface, but it'll let you go through and provide your W-8 information so that we won't have to withhold taxes. Well, we'll follow the treaties, so it just depends on which country you're in, and you provide all that data through an online interface, and then at the end of the year your tax reporting forms will be available on that interface for download. So that's the way we already do it right now. So I say we, but that's what we currently already do, and I keep thinking of Smashwords users coming to Draft2Digital is what I was just describing. But yes, this is how we currently operate. It's been going this way for years and years. So.
Okay. And somebody has asked me, if you have accounts in both Draft2Digital and Smashwords, do you have to merge them? How would they merge them? What do you envisage happening?
So I would call those the technical details of the how is a little unclear. We don't know that yet. We have to investigate some of that. But I can say our goal will be to make it as smooth and simple as possible. And if we can do it for you, we will. So we're only going to ask you questions if we need you to answer a question. And the end goal, though, will be all the Smashwords stuff will be moved over into the Draft2Digital system. So if you have two accounts, I can guarantee you it'll be one account. So we just have to, how we do it is obviously up for debate, because it's a very complicated technical challenge.
And we're going to be very careful. We want to do it in such a way that the burden of this process is on our shoulders, not the author's shoulders, and not on the shoulders of the retailers. We want to make it as easy as possible, as painless as possible.
Yep.
That's a very useful thing to know, actually, because I think some authors have been worried that they might have to do some complicated things to put their two domains together. But you've always seemed to have the ethos of doing things with one click instead of lots of stages. So
yeah. I always say, don't ask somebody a question you already know the answer to. So if you already gave us this information, why are we asking someone the same thing twice? I hate asking the same thing twice. I'm like, this is ridiculous. They already gave us this information. So in that case, once we know where what your Smashwords account is and what your Draft2Digital account is, we're going to know a whole lot of information that we don't need to ask you. So, yeah.
Wonderful. Well, we're out of time. Thank you, Mark and Kris. Just give us each a Twitter name or somewhere that people can find you. Mark.
I'm Mark Coker at Twitter, MarkCoker.
And Kris?
I don't usually do social, but I let my team do it. So you can find us at Draft2Digital at pretty much all the platforms. If you're interested in TikTok, I would recommend going there. There's some fun stuff there. We started really pushing lately, so I recommend that. Yeah.
All right. And do you have a username there? Is that Draft2Digital?
It's Draft2Digital. Yep, you'll find it right there.
Lovely.
Yep.
Well, thank you very much.